Here we go. So we're recording. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for taking the time to be here. And it's always nice to see faces. So anybody who wants to turn their camera on, it's nice to see your face. And if you don't want to, then you don't have to. So my intention with these meetings is for this to be an opportunity. Well, let me just explain. So years ago, I recall in it was 2009. I was living not far from where I live now in Brattleboro, Vermont, in a unfurnished apartment that I didn't furnish. And I spent my days desperately seeking for answers for all of the many problems that I had and imagined that I had, and all the struggles and suffering that I was trying to solve. And I wanted very badly, very desperately, to have a resource that I could turn to find support. And I didn't know where I could go for that. So my intention with these meetings is to provide an opportunity really just for support. And support for what? Support for discovering the ease of being yourself, and to really have an anchoring in that so that you can have confidence in living your life and discover a freedom that you can live from. And so the purpose of these meetings is to provide that support, and to provide support, really it's just support. And you can understand that in any way that you want, and you can receive that on any level that you want. The way that with my intention is that really just being here, our collective presence is a support, and that we can all receive that. And it's a great opportunity to ask questions if there's anything that my life experience or my direct experience can shed some light on for you that could offer you support in your life. So I don't come with an agenda, and my style is not to go on and on unless somebody asks me a question, and then I can talk for a long time. But I'd like to open it up if anybody has a question or something that they'd like to bring up. And so we'll just, the way it works is you can unmute yourself and you can speak. Don't usually have a problem with people speaking over one another. So.
Hi, Joey.
Hi.
This is Jean.
Yeah, hi, Jean. I hear you. I'm searching for you, but I think your camera's off, so it's okay. I don't see you. I don't know if that's by design.
Well, I could turn my camera on, but
it's up to you. Doesn't matter. I don't care.
Okay. So I had an experience where I was, having an encounter with someone that's a difficult person for me and for other people. And I felt like during the encounter, I did fairly well. Just listening and on reactivity, I've already learned that it's useless for me to say anything because this person just needs to vent. And so I came home and it was a little upsetting, but anyway, I went to bed and then I could feel my shoulder start to spasm up, and then the whole left side of my body. And I mean, I hadn't done anything. Sometimes I'll do something, like if I sit in one position for a long time, that will happen, but I hadn't really done anything like that. So I wondered if it was like an emotional reaction later to the incident. But what I'm wondering is, when something like that happens, and I mean, it was incredibly painful. Like, you know, there's no way I could sleep or anything like that. So I laid there for hours, and I could tune into it, and I could relax it a little bit, and I could feel like a slight, you know, relief, but then it would just come back and grab. So I couldn't really get rid of it, and I ended up having to get up and take something just so I could get to sleep. So I'm wondering, you know, if you would have any suggestions on when something like that happens, you know, where a part of your body just clenches up, like how I could work with that.
Yeah. Well, I would say, I mean, I would say almost everybody has. If you only had one part of your body that was doing that all the time, you'd be lucky. I think most of us have a lot of parts of our bodies that are doing that all the time. So in a lot of ways, the question is a lot broader than maybe you had originally conceived it, but I think it's a very relevant question. So the first thing I can say is that in terms of a longer term vision, is that my experience has been that discovering that there is a so I had this discovery some years ago that the physical and emotional are intimately connected, inseparably connected, and that we are often unwittingly producing these states through physical means. So we can, if you wanted to, if you studied yourself, you would learn exactly how you produce states. And so you could produce at will, if you wanted, you could produce any state you wanted. So if you wanted, you could produce the state of you're late and you're in a hurry. So you could learn through observation how you produce that state, and then you could reproduce that anytime that you wanted. Why you would want to do that, I don't know. It wouldn't be a very pleasant thing. But the point is that when I discovered that, then what I realized was that with sufficient awareness, I would have the choice as to whether or not to produce that state. And so most of us, I think my experience has been in communicating with people, most people seem to believe that they are victims of their experience, and they don't realize, as I didn't realize that until I did, that that actually we are at choice. We are choosing, or we have the ability to choose, but that oftentimes what's happening is that we're abdicating that, and we're just letting the automatic reactivity run. So in this particular case, well, so like I said, that's the longer term, is that I believe, and it's my experience, that it's possible to become aware of how we produce these states and how to not produce the states that we don't wish to produce. With that said, in the and so how would one go about doing that? Basically through awareness. So there are ways to enhance that. Certain, as you know, Jean, because you're participating in the somatic training, there are ways to facilitate the development of that awareness so that it's more rapid. But really, any choice of presence and non-reactivity, as you were describing, does facilitate the development of that awareness. It's just that there are more and less skillful means of doing that. And so all of them are good in that they are all developing that awareness. Some are just more skillful and more rapid. I'm not going to profess that I know the most efficient and rapid means. I don't know that I know that. I know what I know, and that's what I share. In the moment, what I can say is that you can, well, what I notice in those sorts of situations is that, and I'm just closing my eyes because it's easier for me to tune into the experience. So I notice that I can sense in my body, let's say, or in my somatic awareness, where there is a clenching and a kind of this self-protective function that occurs. And so you asked about, well, you had hypothesized that perhaps this physical state was the result of some kind of emotional processing that resulted in the physical state later on. Maybe, may not be. And I would say it really doesn't matter, because what matters more is that you can notice in the moment that there's just the this reactivity, and the reactivity, if you bring it right to the core, you can see that it's just pure reactivity, and it doesn't matter what the reaction is to. It's totally irrelevant. It doesn't matter. None of that matters. But you can see then that from that reactivity, our tendency is to try to move, and this is metaphorical, but try to move outward, trying to look for an external solution, looking to thought, looking to memory, looking to figure it out. And that, and I know you know, because I know you, and I know that you already know much of this, but what I've seen is that it gets subtler and subtler, and at each step we can overlook the subtlety, but really it's just subtler and subtler manifestations of the same basic thing, which is reactivity. And then we follow that train of reactivity outward, looking for something that's going to put out the fire, make it stop, and that there is there's another option, which is, and I admit, sometimes when the intensity is high enough, it can be challenging, but nonetheless, it remains available. At least in my experience, it's never not been available. It's just sometimes been more challenging to see, but it is available to allow that impulse of reactivity, in a sense, to just follow it back to the source in direct experience, to just trace it back to the source. Again, in direct experience, so it's not a mental thing, but in direct experience, notice that you can feel the reactivity, the sensation, the experience, and you can allow that to guide you and bring you right back to the source of it. And right at the heart of it, the source of it, there's just it's like a gateway to pure consciousness. And the key then, in my experience, is just to remain with that. But then, as you see, the tendency is to Well, not. Right? The tendency is still to check, did it work? Did it fix it? Did it go away? And then of course it didn't. And so then it's the same thing repeats, which is there's that reactivity, which the impulse is to follow it out to look for a solution. And then again, we can allow that to trace back to the source and then just to rest there.
So when you say follow the reactivity back to the source,
Mm-hmm.
Are you talking about the source emotion or thought?
No. That's why I'm saying it's not a conceptual thing. It is a direct experience.
So back to source, as in source, kind of capital S.
Well, I mean it. No, only because then it's still conceptual. What I'm saying is, so you can notice right now, and everybody who's listening, you can just notice in your direct experience that whatever is happening, so maybe high intensity, maybe low intensity, maybe you care, maybe you don't care, maybe you're feeling good, maybe you're feeling bad, it doesn't matter. But whatever the present experience is, you can notice that in your direct experience. So not trying to, it's not conceptual because you're not looking for a name, you're not looking to know where it came from or what it means or what you're going to do about it. That would all be conceptual, but just the direct experience, noticing the raw sensation. So you can just notice that there's some sensation, some experience, something that is calling for your attention right now. You don't have to go looking for it. It's just whatever you are naturally aware of when you just notice in your direct experience what's happening. And then you can notice that there's a tendency, an impulse to look to mind or to look through the filter of mind to try and when I say mind, I mean the conditioning of the body mind to try and figure out what it is, what it means, what you need to do about it, what your relationship with it is. Do you like it? Do you not like it? Is it good? Is it bad? Is it something that is going to hurt you, or is it something that's going to help you? And you can notice that in your direct experience, there's just the raw experience that is not conceptual. So then, if you just remain with that raw experience, indirect experience, so there's an open quality to the attention in this inquiry. So this is an inquiry. We're just looking to our direct experience, and there's an openness. And when I say openness, what I mean is that we're not trying to get rid of conceptual. We're not trying to get rid of thought. We're not trying to get rid of labels. We're not trying to get rid of the conditioning, but we're just noticing what we don't normally notice. So normally the conditioning, the filter of the mind gets all of our attention, and we don't notice the directness, the immediacy of what's happening that's non-conceptual. So we can allow everything that normally happens, the conditioning, the reactivity, the conceptualization, all of that to happen without trying to get rid of it or fight with it. But we also don't have to engage with it or give our attention to it, trying to figure something out or understand it. So it's like taking a step back or shifting perspective or focus to just notice the context. And by allowing that shift, then rather than having this relationship with the experience defined by the conditioned reactivity, now there's a space for a curious investigation. And so now we can allow attention to rest in this open, curious way, letting things just flow as they're flowing, but just a soft, gentle focus, like just shining a light on the raw experience. And then let that reveal in this very direct way what the actual nature of this experience is. That's what I'm referring to as the source, is just the actual nature of the experience.
Okay.
You can tell by the tone of your voice that you're not pleased about that response. So you didn't like the experience, and you were and you're hoping that I can tell you what you can do so that you don't have that happen again. Is that right?
Well, that would be wonderful.
Yeah.
I mean, it is kind of a reoccurring thing.
Well, what's the reoccurring thing though? The thing in the sleep or the encounters with the person?
No, the clenching of the left shoulder and the contraction. I mean, it's always kind of contracted on the left side, but then this is like times a million.
Yeah, right.
And it's almost like so painful that it's hard to think or, you know, to,
Mm-hmm.
So, but I am kind of latching on to the whole thing of just letting the light shine on the experience and see what I notice.
Yeah. And because you have, so you're participating in the somatic training, and so so you have some familiarity with that, and really with that work, and this is, and I'll say this to everybody here as a general statement. If you notice, so many of us become aware of these habits of armoring and tension in our bodies, but we don't know what to do about that. We don't really know. The only thing that we know to do, most of us, is to try to use opposing force to combat, or in our minds, correct the experience that we don't like, the tension. So we have a shoulder that's coming up, and we think, okay, the solution is going to be bring the shoulder down. Well, it's a nice idea and it makes sense in some ways, but the problem is that because we don't know how to voluntarily sense and release the armoring that's going on, all that we can actually do is use opposing force, which is going to be more tension, trying to oppose the state that's occurring. So that doesn't work, as you know, as most of us know. And so that leads us to try all kinds of things, and then eventually to despair and hopelessness and all kinds of horrible stuff, which I know well. So the first and foremost is, I mean, first I'd say it's a miracle that you are aware of it to the degree that you are, and that, I think, is something to start from. There is just to start from recognizing that that is something, that you are aware of that, and that's huge. That's a gift, because if you weren't aware, then you wouldn't have the possibility of doing something intelligent. And I know that sometimes it's hard to have gratitude for that, but if you just imagine, or you can just look around you and look around in the world, and you can see that there are many, 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 many people who don't have that level of awareness that you take for granted. And so that you have that level of awareness is a gift, and I think that it's something to be grateful for. And when you recognize that, then it can give you it can put it in perspective, and it can show you that actually there is something that you can do, but you've probably been resistant to doing it because it's, for whatever reason, because it seemed overwhelming, because it would mean facing or feeling the things that have been overwhelming in the past, or that you've just preferred to keep at a distance, or suppressed. So, for me, for example, so I first became aware of this, I don't remember how many years ago, but I did have a moment in which something became very clear to me that I hadn't previously realized it. That was in 2010. I was very, very sick, and I had terrible digestive problems, among all kinds of other things, and the food just didn't move through my digestive system. It would just sit. It was so uncomfortable, and I was just obsessed with this because it was so uncomfortable. So all day long was just this obsession with the discomfort of the food not moving, and I was starving, but I was also not wanting to eat because eating was so uncomfortable. And so I was lying on a couch, and I had a habit of massaging my belly, trying to get the food to move. And I had this realization, which was, wow, my abdomen's really tense, and maybe that has something to do with what I'm experiencing. So I just started to explore through direct experience that sensation, and noticed that I had been very reactive up until that moment, just only reactive. I didn't have any real presence in regard to the experience. And so in that moment of becoming aware, this was a huge shift, because suddenly I realized, wow, I have a choice here. But what I also became aware of was that I was terrified of letting go of that tension, because I had a very strong sense that letting go of that tension was going to open me up to feelings of intense anger and vulnerability that I really had not wanted to experience. So it took me a while before I was willing to open up to that. And the reason that I think that that's terrifying is that those habits that we have of how we physically armor ourselves or try to steel ourselves against things are the habits that we've learned, probably most of us at an early age. But whenever we learn them, we learned these habits as a way of trying to manage the emotions and the feelings that we felt overwhelmed by and we didn't know how to deal with. And over time, because we've continued to perpetuate those patterns, for most of us, it's actually intensified. So the thing that was seemed overwhelming before, now it's grown in proportion because we've avoided it and pushed it away and tried so hard to manage it. It in our minds, in our imaginations, it's blown up way bigger, and it seems like this thing that we absolutely could never allow. So, and I think intuitively we all have a sense that the actual meeting and integration of these things that we've pushed away involves us being totally vulnerable, and that's the thing. So there I was. I had this insight into, which was really the insight into the solution to my problem, but the solution that was clear to me was a solution of absolute vulnerability. It was absolute, like I had to, in order to really integrate and discover my wholeness, and healing. The root of the verb to heal is wholeness. So when we want to heal, we want wholeness. I recognized that my wholeness, and intuitively, I didn't intellectually understand this, but intuitively I knew that the key, the secret to my healing, i.e. wholeness, was to be absolutely vulnerable and make no effort whatsoever to push away or protect myself from the experience that I had been trying my whole life up until that point to keep at a distance and to protect myself from. So in a sense, so for example, this habit of doing the thing, whatever you do with your shoulder, that habit is, and you say it's a frequent occurrence, so it makes sense. This is a habit that you've learned from managing your experience that now you're aware isn't really working very well for you, and so you want something different. Now, this is a habit that exists in the nervous system, and that habit can be instantaneously released and replaced with something different. There's no reason why that couldn't happen. So then, and I'm not saying it has to happen that way, but there's no reason it could not happen that way. If you think about it, why on earth would you be compelled to, forget about compelled, I mean, compelled is a different thing. Why on earth would you be forced to and have no choice whatsoever but to react in these, if we look at it in a certain way, we could say kind of weird physical armorings to our feelings. There's no good reason for that. We're not designed that must happen. And so if that's happening, it's happening because of this conditioning. The conditioning can be released, and it can be released instantaneously, theoretically, and in practice it sometimes is. So the habit is just stored in the nervous system. And in order to release that habit, we have to be willing to, that habit in the nervous system is it's sort of like the immune system in a sense. You've got these, you call them phagocytes, I think. They're these things that they eat, I'm using the term eat, they surround things that they consider to be toxins or foreign things that need to be gotten rid of. So the phagocytes surround them, encapsulate them, and then bring them to other parts of the body where they can be eliminated. So in the same way, it's like our nervous system has encapsulated in these bubbles these things that we thought were problems that we needed to get rid of. And so then these habits that manifest as this armoring in the body is the manifestation of that in the nervous system. So then if we want healing, the healing is wholeness. So these things have been mistakenly, they're aspects of ourselves that we have mistakenly identified as foreign things that need to be protected against. And their feelings, their experiences. So in order to experience healing and wholeness, we have to be willing to integrate. In order to integrate, we have to be willing to take the capsule off of the thing and allow it to be reintegrated into the whatever, into ourselves. And that just means that we it's like the cliche, feeling is healing. You can't leap over that part, because the feeling is what is the aspect of our wholeness that has been pushed away or encapsulated, and we've been trying to protect ourselves from. So when these things occur, our conditioned reactivity is, this is a problem, I got to get rid of it, I got to solve it, and then we want a solution. But what I'm saying is that the real answer is the answer of integration, and that comes about through surrender, not through getting rid of. And so it's challenging because we still keep looking for a solution to a problem, but the problem has been incorrectly identified as such, because it's actually an aspect of ourselves that needs to be integrated. And in order to integrate that, we have to be willing to be vulnerable. We can't keep parts of ourselves sectioned off. It just doesn't work. So back to, so what can you do? Well, I would say that you can, rather than moving away from or trying to understand the experience, instead you can surrender, and that surrender is surrender to wholeness. It's a surrender. It's a surrender to wholeness. So there has to be a trust, and trust always requires a leap of faith. I'm not a big fan of huge leaps of faith. I think it's better to take small leaps of faith consistently, but it always requires a leap of faith to trust in that wholeness. Because wholeness, if we really are willing to trust that wholeness is true, that there really is wholeness, and that wholeness is accessible to us, that we're not somehow separate from that, then we have to be willing to trust that whatever is happening is also part of that wholeness. I mean, by definition, it is, but we have to be willing to actually trust that experientially, and we can do that by no longer armoring ourselves against our own experience. And my repeated experience with this is that the surrender does not look the way that it did the last time. It doesn't look the way that I think it should look. It looks like this now. And when I just surrender to that, just surrender to this as it is now, without my agenda of what I think it is and what I think it means and what I think it should, where I think it should go, and I think it should go where the sun doesn't shine. But if I'm willing to let go of that and really surrender to the wholeness that's actually here, it's like a shift in order as well, because there's a sense, what the experience is revealing is that there's still a sense of myself as something separate and something that can be harmed or destroyed. And so the experience is revealing, and this is true, by the way, I mean, as far as I can determine, it's consistently true that every experience is revealing this. So that's why I pointed out earlier, everybody who is here can inquire and notice this now, that whatever experience is happening now, it's really a call to wholeness. And it's a call to surrender to the wholeness that's already present, already true, already the case. And so no matter whether you think you like the experience or you think you don't like the experience, the fact remains that this experience is part of wholeness. And so long as it's pushed away, then it's going to keep knocking on the door because it's part of wholeness. And it needs to be integrated for there to be ease. Because how can there be ease and flow when there are parts of self that have been encapsulated and pushed over there for garbage disposal? It just doesn't work.
Okay, that's helpful. Would you say then it's kind of like the whole meeting of emotion thing, like just being open to whatever the body might be saying or the emotions might be saying through the body, and then
Yeah, but it's simpler.
Okay.
Or it's more direct. I mean, it's more direct than what you just said, and that might just be because of the words you use. But it's just for the sake of clarification, it's instantaneous, and it's really just, so you can imagine, and I would invite everybody right now just to imagine, it would be an interesting thing to imagine, but imagine that you are hanging on to, let's say there's a cliff, and growing out of the side of the cliff is a little twig, and you are holding on to that twig, and the only thing keeping you from falling is this twig that's about to break. So this is the situation we often find ourselves in metaphorically, but you can notice that a lot of the time we're hanging on for dear life, gripping, armoring, protecting, trying to just get through, hoping that tomorrow will be better. And this absolute simplicity, so you can see how much effort that requires. It's a lot of effort and a lot of fear. But how much effort is required just to let go? And so that's really what I'm proposing, is that kind of simplicity. It's just, that's what true surrender is. It's not a feeling. It's not a particular state. You don't have to have a particular experience. It's just to cease making the effort to protect yourself, because you've caught on to the fact that you can't. Who on earth can protect themselves? Nobody. You against life, who's going to win? Not you. And so what it is revealing, so from the perspective that most of us are coming from, where we're holding on for dear life, it seems like I'm going to die if I let go. I will die. Life will continue. I will die. I have to hold on because life is not looking out for me. Life's the one that put me here in this position. I'm a victim, and it's dog eat dog, and I'm going to hang on for dear life. But what is actually being shown, at least what I find time and time again, and I would invite everybody here to find out right now, Just let go. Just for a moment. That's why I say it doesn't have to be a big leap of faith, just a small leap of faith, just for an instant right now. Just let go. And if your mind says, well, how do I do that? Forget about that. Forget about anything that you could, anything you could forget about that. Because if you're the one, if you're really hanging on to the twig growing out of the edge of the cliff, you don't have to think about how to let go. Letting go is about to happen anyway, because it's exhausting. You can't keep holding on. So you already know how to let go. Letting go doesn't require anything. Holding on is what requires something. So it's about noticing really how you're holding on, and then just stop making that effort. And so that's what all of the experiences are revealing. That's what I'm pointing out, is that every experience is revealing how you're still holding on, how you're still making the unnecessary effort. And the conditioned reactivity is to run away from it or fight against it, because we perceive it as the enemy. We perceive that we are all alone in a hostile universe, and we've got to fight tooth and nail. And what I'm saying is, just for an instant right now, for everybody, find out what happens if you just don't make any effort. You can find out right now, for example, if you don't make any effort whatsoever, just notice your breath. So don't make any effort with your breath. Don't try to stop your breath, and don't try to breathe. You'll notice that it's happening. The breath is happening. So in the same way, you can then notice that you don't need to make any effort at all. You don't need to make an effort to pay attention to thought. You don't need to make an effort to avoid thought. You don't need to make an effort to fight against thought. You don't need to make an effort to feel your feelings. You don't need to make an effort not to feel your feelings. You don't need to make an effort for anything in this moment. And when we allow this kind of effortlessness, this is the vulnerability that I'm talking about. There was many years ago, there's an herb called Salvia divinorum, which is a very interesting herb, and it's not very absorbable through the digestive system. So sometimes people smoke it. I'm not big into smoking things, and it had to be really hot. So I'm definitely not into smoking really hot things. So the alternative and the traditional method, it's used traditionally for divination. And so the traditional method is to take some of the leaves and just hold them in the mouth for a while, and it can be absorbed through the mouth. So I did this and had this sort of profound experience, but then I became terrified that my heart would stop beating. Was it my heart would stop beating if I didn't pay attention, or that I would stop breathing if it was one of the two? I don't know. So I had this sort of nightmarish experience where I was thinking that I had to keep paying attention and keep beating my heart or breathing. I don't remember which it was. And so that's kind of how a lot of us are living our lives, is not necessarily specifically with breathing or the heart beating, but that we have to be doing our lives. We have to be managing our lives. We have to be protecting ourselves. And so that's hell. And if you just let go now, just for an instant, just let go of whatever you think that you need to be doing. Trying to figure it out, understand it, listening to me, thinking about what just happened, thinking about what's going to happen, thinking about where your money's going to come from, thinking about what your child is doing, thinking about whatever, just for one instant, and just see what happens. If you're just willing to just be vulnerable to your own experience, just intimate with your own experience, just for one instant.
Yeah, when I did that, I could feel like when I let go, I'm still having some of the pain that I was having last night, although it isn't as intense.
Yeah.
But I could feel maybe a very minor difference in the feeling in my shoulder, but what more I could feel is the added stress of the mind dissipated, like,
Yeah.
you know, so I wasn't adding
Mhm.
that on to the pain.
Mhm. So that's the first step. Yeah. Awesome. And then the second step is, and this is why I said that there are more and less skillful means. So the second step, and it really depends on the state of your somatic awareness. You know, if you, for people who have a lot of trauma, they don't know how, they don't have enough somatic awareness to know how to, through intention and direct experience, to release unnecessary effort, to release the armoring and the holding on and the clenching that's happening in the body. And so when such a thing happens, always first step is just what we talked about. So to just remain with direct experience, presence, non-reactivity is first step. Second step is to to allow the sensation or the experience to be a guide. So it's guiding you to, if you allow it, it's guiding you to where it is in your body mind, where it is that you are clenching, so that it's directing you to discover where you can surrender, where you can release. So then the more skillful means that I'm aware of, which again, you're in the somatic training, is exactly that, to use very slow movement done with awareness in order to reawaken that somatic awareness, so that you can gain voluntary control over that part of your body, so that you can voluntarily release that armoring. So, you know, I can't, I don't know that we're going to be able to resolve this right now in this call. I mean, I'd be happy to give it a shot, but it would be harder for me to do without knowing a little bit more about precisely where you're experiencing the discomfort. But if it's just the shoulder coming up like this, then what you can do, I mean, one simple thing that you can do is you can, so as you know, touch can be just gentle touch as feedback can be very helpful in the process. So if you said it's your left shoulder, you can take your right hand and just gently rest it on your right shoulder. And then you can slowly turn your head to the right. And with your head slowly turned to the right, then you can slowly lift the left shoulder and slowly release the left shoulder. And that is a very simple thing that you can do that will allow you to reawaken that somatic awareness, so that you can then voluntarily release that habit of armoring in the shoulder. That's, without exploring it in together a little bit more, I don't know that that will be the thing that's going to help, but that's a suggestion that I have that you could explore. I have other suggestions, but I would start with that one.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Who else?
Hi, Joey.
Hi.
Sandy here.
Yep.
Yeah, while we were doing that visualization of letting go, well, not a visualization, while we were letting go, a memory came up from childhood.
Mm-hmm.
And then a feeling of sadness and fear.
Mm-hmm.
And then noticing a huge amount of tension in the belly.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then you spoke about trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And like Jean, I've been having a lot of shoulder problem, a lot of problems in my groin.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I just want to thank Jean for bringing it up.
Mm-hmm.
And your explanation or talk about the letting go and noticing how much gripping on I do, not knowing that I'm doing it,
Right.
and yeah, and that letting go, well, the gripping on is like fear of fear.
Yeah.
Fear of a 6-year-old's fear of being alone in a situation that's just totally alien.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And just being with that.
Mm-hmm.
And letting go.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what will happen, but
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. You don't. That's why it requires a leap of faith, because you don't know.
Yeah.
But the trust is, the trust is in this higher order. The higher order is yourself, but it's just that your conditioned sense of who you are, it doesn't include that. Your conditioned sense of yourself is this thing over here that needs to be protected, and everything else needs to be over there.
Yeah.
And as you said, this conditioning came about at times when we didn't have as many resources available to us. And so you'll notice, I mean, we all can notice that under stress, particularly, that the resources that we have when we're not under stress go out the window, because what's happening is that trauma is activated, and all of the resources that were not available at that time become unavailable, unless we choose to surrender and connect with that higher order. So there is, so we're trusting in wholeness. And most of us don't do that until we're in so much pain and suffering so much that we don't really know what else to do. I mean, I didn't until I was brought to my knees, and I was pretty sure I was going to die. So, we're, it's very fortunate, I think, and it's a real blessing when somebody discovers this at all. That's why I said just to have the awareness of it is something to celebrate, because without that awareness, you're just going to live like a victim. When you have the awareness, then you have choice, and then you don't have to live like a victim. You can pretend like you're a victim, but that doesn't feel very good. So then you hopefully start to make the choice to surrender. And the reason I always propose small leaps of faith is because then you don't have to, you can just keep proving to yourself bit by bit. Like, hopefully everybody here, when I was prompting and guiding, just explored what it is just to let go for an instant. And in that letting go for one instant, then there's the revelation that, oh, I'm still here. I thought I was going to be destroyed maybe, but turns out I'm still here. So then that small leap of faith yields the proof or the evidence that wholeness is real, or that a higher order is real. Something is real that is greater than my previous self-concept. And the more that we do that, then the more we can let go of, the more we're unburdened by all of these definitions of ourselves and all of these. It is like armor. It's like we walk around with this armor. You know, those, you ever go to a museum and see a display of medieval armor? And
Yeah.
I remember as a kid seeing that, and I thought, how on earth did anybody walk around in that? That stuff is heavy. So that's kind of what most of us are doing, though. You know, it's not that far off. It's like we're walking around in medieval armor, and we're wondering why we're exhausted, and why we don't feel that why we feel separate from others, why we feel separate from life, why we feel so easily irritated. Yeah, because we're wearing a bunch of armor.
Yeah. Joy, lack of sleep at night, like waking up all the time, do you think that's something similar, like not being able to let go?
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Not being able to let go into deep sleep or something like that?
Well, yeah, I mean, again, so from my perspective, everything's connected. So I really don't see any real separation between any of the domains that people imagine. So mental, emotional, physical, spiritual, to me, it's all one. So, so yes, if you have poor sleep, then from my perspective, that is almost certainly a manifestation of chronic armoring. And that's certainly been my experience. My sleep was, so through the somatic work, I've dramatically transformed my sleep. I was when I was like 24 or 25, I started having to pee a whole bunch in the night. This is one of those things, too much information, but whatever. I would have to pee a lot of times in the night, and it only got worse. And then I had Lyme disease, and then I was starving, and I had all these things. And by the time it was 2012, I lost track of how many times I was peeing in the night. I mean, it was at least 8 times, and I couldn't really get to sleep in between, and I was in pain, and when I wasn't experiencing pain, I was experiencing intense anxiety, and I would just lie awake, eyes wide open, and it was just crazy.
Sounds like you're describing me.
Yeah. So, you're talking about, you've identified that you have chronic tension in the groin. I had massive chronic tension in the groin, and that was a huge part of why I was having this pee in the night so frequently, because the chronic tension in the groin, in the pelvis, and in the abdomen is gonna put a lot of pressure on the bladder, and so that has resolved for me, and as well as I could never get comfortable when I was trying to sleep, and that's totally changed. So those from my perspective, it's all because of the armoring, and it's all connected. So the mental armoring, the emotional armoring, the physical armoring, it's all the same. They're just different facets of the same energetic process.
Right.
And there are many, like I said earlier, there are many ways to approach this in terms of healing, and there are probably people who have much more advanced understanding and knowledge of this, who have, they can snap their fingers and it all resolves. I don't have that knowledge at present, but what I do know, and what I'm sharing through the somatic work, is that this slow movement done with awareness facilitates the awakening of that somatic awareness, and that in and of itself doesn't necessarily instantly translate into a release of the tension, but what it does do is it awakens that awareness, and through that awareness you then regain the ability to voluntarily release that at will. And that allows you to establish a new habit of non-armoring.
Yeah. Okay. Just going to the somatic, I'm getting confused as to which exercises I'm meant to be doing, so maybe I could drop you a message or something like that.
Yeah, I know that it's a little bit, I have to clean it up a little bit, but yeah, feel free, and just send it in the messenger group.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you. Anybody else? While we're waiting, I don't normally want to take questions via other means, but I did get a couple of questions from somebody who I'm going to respond to here. So I'll just read them and respond to them, and then open it back up if anybody else has anything they want to ask. So this person asked two questions. The first one is, what do you mean awareness of awareness? I have seen the effortless experience of being that allows it all in my experience. Is this what you're also referring to when you say awareness of awareness? I would say you don't need to get hung up on that. If you recognize the effortlessness of being, then that's good enough. Awareness, when I refer to awareness of awareness, it's just to notice. So awareness is always the case. Everybody can test that for themselves. You can just notice that you are aware. And then but awareness of awareness is to allow your attention to be at rest. Because the normal habit is for attention to go to things, to go to objects, thoughts, ideas, feelings, labels, etc. But to just allow that to rest is awareness of awareness, which is effortless, the effortlessness of being. So it's the same thing. And the second question is, I feel socially isolated, so I try meeting people and people try to blow me off. Do you think right now, since I don't have it right now, just allow my experience of lacking social life? I would say that you can just notice what's the authentic desire, and then to trust that. So as I said at the beginning of this, my intention is to support all of us in being authentically ourselves. Each of us is unique. Each of us is here, and we can choose to downplay that. We can choose to try and hide and diminish ourselves, or we can just tell the truth, which is that we're here and we're unique, and we don't need to say, hey everybody, you should celebrate me because of my uniqueness. That's not the point, but it's just that we can notice that we, by virtue of the fact that we are, our uniqueness and our unique desires and our unique expression is worthy of being. And so if there's an authentic desire for social connection, which is pretty healthy and normal, then I would say you can trust that. And you can also trust that sometimes life is challenging, and socializing can be challenging because it's going to reveal a lot. You know, I mean, I continues to reveal a lot to me. And so to me, it's a lifelong exploration. And I don't think in general for most people that isolating is healthy or a good idea. If there's an authentic desire for connection with others, then I would encourage you to continue to explore that. And to explore that, to notice, and the person who asked this question, I had responded previously to this person with when they asked a similar question. And just to notice how every opportunity, every experience points us to a greater clarity on what we really desire and what's really available to us, and how it is that we've been going about things that maybe hasn't been all that useful or helpful. And so if you have an authentic desire for social connection, for intimate connection with others, then if it doesn't seem like your attempts are resulting in the kinds of outcomes that you're hoping for, then you can take that disappointment and turn that into, it's like the story of sour grapes, the fox and the grapes, or whatever that story is. You know, the fox sees the grapes, wants the grapes, but can't get the grapes, and then just walks away and says, well, they were sour anyway. So you can take the disappointment and use it in that way, or you can take the disappointment and use it as feedback. How is it that I've been betraying myself here? And maybe I've been betraying myself because I mean, there's so many different ways that we can betray ourselves in our seeking for connection with others. Maybe we pretend to be something other than what we are. Maybe we are trying to find people in things that are not really authentically ourselves. There's all kinds of feedback that we can get from the experiences that can guide us. And that's what I was saying earlier about the sensations in the body. It's just, to me, it's true of everything. Any experience is providing us with feedback. And that feedback is either going to tell us, yes, this is in alignment with that deep, authentic desire, or it's not. And if it's not, then we can either turn that into this negative, self-defeating thing, or we can use that, we can just receive that as feedback, and it's helpful feedback. So again, it's life supporting us rather than life being this hostile thing that's just out to get us and we're all alone and we have to figure it out all on our own. We're actually getting tremendous support from life all the time because it's constantly giving us feedback. Every feeling, every emotion, every sensation, every word, every thought, everything that happens is giving us feedback that lets us know, is this in alignment with my deep, authentic desire and expression, or is it not? And if it's not, then that's useful. That's great to know. I understand that it can be hard, but again, it comes back to trust. I really feel like I can choose to view life as a hostile thing or an empty thing, Or I can choose to view it as wholeness. I can choose to view it as something that I am intimately one with, and that I can trust in, that is supporting me. And actually the overwhelming evidence is for the latter, because the truth is we're all here. Every one of us is here, and that's something that we can trivialize. And we can certainly come up with all kinds of reasons why that's not good enough, because I don't have enough money, and I don't have enough friends, and I don't have people who love me enough, and I don't have good enough health, and I don't have the right feelings, and I don't have all these things. But the actual reality is life is supporting us, because every one of us is here. And every experience that we've ever had was part of this. You can't take any experience away, because it's all been essential. It's all been part of what has been necessary for this moment to be. And so life has absolutely, unquestionably been supporting us, because it's offered us all of this experience that's allowed for this right now to be. So when we can, and you can look back now on all the experience that you've had in your life, and all of us have gone through some very difficult things. There's nobody here who hasn't gone through difficult things. And you can tell the truth, which is you're still here. And in fact, all those difficult things, where are they now? So the trauma is when we repeat those things, the wrong learning, as if it was true. But we can choose now to recognize that the wrong learning was the wrong learning, and that the truth is, it's abundantly clear that life is supporting us. We're breathing, our hearts are beating, we're here, we're aware. And all of the excuses and the arguments that we can make are just thoughts. But presence, aliveness, holds it all. It allows all of it. There's space for all of it. And that's our actual intimate experience of ourselves. So then it's just a matter of what can we do, how can we receive that support? And that's the question that I'm interested in. And there's so many ways that we can receive that support. And those are the things that I'm excited about. Because the support is here, the support is real, the support is available. So then it's just, how can we receive it? How can we be open to that? And hopefully the things that I share are helpful in that regard. Hopefully this right now, just coming together. That's why I said it at the beginning, that us just being here together is support. And my intention is that every one of us receives that support, and that we can't help but be changed. We're always changed by whatever happens, by our experience. Everything that happens doesn't change our essential being, but it changes our sense of self. It changes who we understand ourselves to be in our experience of ourselves. And what I'm proposing is that the intention or the movement of life is for that change to be a clarifying change, so that the change is always greater clarity of who I am, what life is, the intimacy of my own direct experience, and the support that's always available. Anybody else? Okay. Well, thank you, everybody. A few final notes. This is going to be on YouTube later, and and if I offer these at no charge. I do appreciate financial contributions. If you would like to make a donation, you can do that at joeylott.com/give. And this is, I also appreciate some feedback. Anybody who wants to email me and let me know if this time and this day works well for people, better than the Tuesday morning time. I appreciate hearing that, and then if so, I can make it a more regular time. Presently, I'm doing Tuesday mornings regularly, but I could also add a second time, so I appreciate hearing the feedback on it. So
What time Tuesday morning?
What's that?
What time on Tuesday morning?
The regular meeting is Tuesday morning at 10 a.m. U.S. Eastern Time.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Joey, I really appreciate this time, because being in Australia, I miss just about everything else.
Mm-hmm.
So this is great. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. See you next time.